Okay, let's jump right into the source material. We are diving deep, really trying to unpack how American identity works, specifically this concept of whiteness. Our mission today really is to figure out why this status seems so changeable for some groups, but then completely rigid, like fixed for others.
Exactly. And the sources we're looking at use a critical lens, framing whiteness not as, biology, but more as a social and political structure, something constructed.
Right, a position of power that groups have, well, historically kind of traded or fought over. And we're focusing on this key comparison, how different European ethnics assimilated into whiteness versus the totally different experience of foundational Black Americans, FBAs, the descendants of the freedmen who face this kind of permanent structural caste status.
And if you look at it structurally, whiteness really functions as this sort of American default because it's the norm, the standard, the privileges that come with it are often invisible to those holding them.
Privilege blindness.
Exactly. And that invisibility helps protect the structural power embedded within it.
Okay, so how does that connect to, I think the sources mention whiteness as property. That sounds pretty stark.
It does, but it's a core legal concept discussed here. Whiteness functioning as property means it holds value, partly because it grants certain rights, the right to use, to enjoy certain benefits, and really critically, the absolute right to exclude others.
Okay, and here's where it gets really interesting, according to the sources. The value of this racial property, this asset, fundamentally depends on keeping a permanent other group at the bottom.
Precisely. The structurally immutable status of foundational Black Americans, that FBA caste, is what guarantees the asset remains exclusive. It shores up the value for everyone else.
So let's trace that assimilation path. You mentioned European ethnics like the Irish, Italians. They were initially seen as white.
Not fully, no. They are often racialized as distinct Euro races, as the sources put it. They face significant prejudice.
Right. I remember reading some examples. Irish immigrants depicted almost like apes in cartoons, and Italians stereotyped as genuine Italian bandits, black-eyed and swarthy. Really visceral stuff.
Definitely. Intense ethnic prejudice, but crucially, their status wasn't seen as permanent in the same way. It was transferable.
Transferable how? What did they have to do?
Well, to gain access, to assimilate fully, they essentially had to accept what's often called the brutal bargain. This meant shedding those distinct ethnic identities and actively aligning themselves with the dominant white power structure.
Okay, the brutal bargain. And what was the price of admission, so to speak?
It seems to have been twofold. First, their upward mobility got a boost from government policies, like New Deal programs, which disproportionately benefited white ethnics, helping them enter the middle class.
Okay, so structural support.
Yes. But the other side of the coin, the real solidification of their inclusion, often involved active anti-Blackness.
How so? Can you give examples?
Well, history shows things like intense, sometimes violent labor competition, like the documented perpetual warfare between Irish and Black workers over scarce jobs. And even much later, you see the violent defense of segregated neighborhoods by white ethnic communities. The 1989 murder of Yusuf Hawkins in Bensonhurst is a stark example mentioned.
Wow. Okay, so inclusion for them was tied to excluding others.
That's the argument presented. Now, contrast that transferable status, that possibility of assimilation, with the permanent fixed status of foundational Black Americans.
Right, the FBA caste.
Their status, rooted in chattel slavery, was legally cemented by things like the one-drop rule or hypodescent. Basically, any known African ancestry made Blackness permanent, indelible. There was no assimilation pathway available in the same way.
So it wasn't about culture or time, it was about this fixed legal and social definition.
Exactly. And this structure persists. Look at the 1944 GI Bill, a huge engine of post-war prosperity. The sources highlight how its administration was deeply discriminatory. It massively helped white ethnics get homes, education, but systematically limited FBA access, especially to mortgages and housing benefits. This directly contributed to the ongoing systemic wealth gap.
So it structurally lifted one group while actively holding another back?
That's the structural impact described.
And this isn't just history, right? What does it mean today? The sources say exclusion still happens even when Black Americans achieve economic success.
That's a key finding. Research cited shows Black Americans remain more highly segregated than any other race ethnic group at all SES levels.
All SES levels.
Yeah.
So even middle class or wealthy Black families face higher segregation.
Correct. Across socioeconomic strata. Which really underscores the argument that this isn't just about class, it functions like a caste system, a fixed social rank.
Okay, so summing up the core finding here. The American hierarchy is really defined by this stark contrast. Whiteness operates like an asset, something potentially acquired, often through exclusion and enforcing that color line. Whereas blackness, for FBAs, functions as this permanent caste status ensuring exclusion, almost regardless of individual achievement.
It's a powerful framework, and that assimilation of white ethnics by ultimately creating a more unified white majority arguably solidified the whole racial structure's longevity. Which leaves us with a provocative thought for you, the listener, to consider. If the historical price of admission into whiteness often involved actively enforcing anti-blackness, what structures or maybe even attitudes or actions function today as the sort of modern-day price of admission for securing perceived privilege within the system?